We've had a few little technical issues which seem to have been resolved, which is good. Welcome to the first council meeting of 2023. Um, just reminding people that this meeting is being recorded and streamed live on the internet. All care is taken to maintain your privacy in the public gallery, but if you are submitting a question, you may be recorded, you will be recorded, and your presence may be recorded, and you may be seen on the internet. So, can I make sure when both elected members and members of the public are speaking that you get nice and close to the microphones, because it really helps people who are tuning in online. So we'll start by acknowledging the Whadjuk people. Nala Kadak Whadjuk Mort, Kan Kadak Nijawalila Butcher, we're Jinning Whadjuk Kadachin, we're Bulla, we're knitting Bulla, yeah. We have some apologies and some applications for leave of absence. We have an apology from Councillor Groom, who's currently helping up in Fitzroy Crossing and that area. We have 3 applications for leaves of absence. Councillor Graham requests leaves of absence from 13th February to 19th February. Can we do these all together? Yep. Councillor Groom requests the leave of absence for the next OCM on 22nd of February, and Councillor Thompson's requesting a leave of absence for the 10th of March to the 22nd of May. Any more to add to that list? Councillor Lang? Oh, okay. Well, I'll move it and you can second it. All those in favour? All right, that's unanimous. Are there any disclosures of interest by members in relation to tonight's agenda? No, good. There's some responses to previous public questions taken on notice in the agenda, and that will bring us to public question time. Because we didn't have committees this month, we've had some items that have come straight through to council. So I propose that in public question time, if we want to ask any questions of the people who are speaking about the items, as we normally would in a committee, that we're able to do that tonight as well. So a couple here, I'm not quite sure what they're speaking on, so I might just bring those ones to the front. So Robert Kidd, did you want to speak first? So you've got 3 minutes. It is recorded for the purpose of the minutes. And I'll give you a little warning if we're running out of time.
Thank you very much. An amazing heritage opportunity is afforded now that the Woolstores shopping centre has been demolished. From 1985 until just recently, an array of heritage items may have gone undetected under the soil. About 50 years prior to the building of the Woolstores shopping centre, the site had an Elders wool store on it. Evidence of that old Elders wool store that occupied the entire site, plus the car park that's been retained, are probably still buried there. Lying under this site, prior to 1935, could be remnants of previous older buildings, of which very few photographs exist. And there's a picture from John Dowsman's book, Old Fremantle, opposite page 105, that shows one of the few photographs of Cantonment Street. This old Woolstore building covered houses and parts of the old riverbed that go back to the times of earlier settlement. In those days, little attempt was made to record everyday heritage. I believe that a time capsule of natural and man-made artefacts could still exist, and ask that the Fremantle City Council insist on a thorough archaeological assessment by professionals. It's important that before construction commences, that reasonable access to the site be afforded to such people. Thank you.
Thank you. I might now get David McAuliffe. What item were you going to speak on? None? Just here. Good. All right, so I'll go back to the order as I had listed. So Rob O'Brien on the Woolstores item.
Thank you all for your time. The Woolstores has been a very challenging project for Silverleaf, but it is one that is vitally important to Fremantle's CBD by returning a full-line supermarket and childcare services. These things are both essential to support the current residents and future growth in inner city residents. Dominic Snellgrove and the CCN team have done an excellent job in reinvigorating the challenged wool source project and driving it forward during a very challenging building environment and economic environment too. However, we do request that the council do consider the removal of condition 9, proposing a 3.65 metre setback on the Queen Street. Subsequent to the acquisition of the shopping centre in 2014, Silverleaf have acquired a number of strata shops along Queen Street at a significant capital cost. Requiring a setback of 3.65 metres does affect the economic viability of the project by reducing the available floor space for lease in both office and commercial and retail, and also does impact the design and layout of the available shops. CCM have provided plans to the council which show an excellent streetscape based on a 2 metre setback, which still allows for a very generous virgin footpath of 4.9 metres. We are very excited to start the redevelopment of the wool stores and would really appreciate the councillor's support for our request to remove condition 9. And Bryn, I will remove all the weeds tomorrow morning too. Thank you.
Sorry, I might just keep you up there for a minute because, like in planning, I'll give elected members an opportunity to ask you any questions that they might have. Councillor Pemberton.
Oh, apparently I'm Sue. Hi, Rob. Thanks for coming along. I did have a question and thought that I'd get a chance to ask it at JDAP, but I'll ask it now. I had some concerns about the bicycle parking being on level 2 and just wanted to understand how you envisage that working, because I'm a bit concerned about the practicalities of people on bikes going up the car park ramp with the traffic or going up in the lift, but potentially with kids being dropped off to childcare and that sort of thing, and just wanted to understand how you thought that it might work.
I have spoken to CCN since then. They are looking at the design outcome. I think they're going to bring some more down to a lower level because it is quite a steep ramp to push a bike up. So definitely they're looking at that in the design outcome with Keith Tan and the CCN team.
Okay, thank you, and I'll follow up when we get to JDAP. Thanks.
Any others? I guess it's following up on the speaker in the public gallery, are there any plans to do any archaeological assessment of the site?
No, there's not.
Not at this stage. Okay. Thanks. That's no more from anyone else. All good. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. I think that's everyone on that item. So Ian Kerr on the local government reform item.
Thank you, Mayor and Councillors. I commend the Office for their review of the ward and related requirements of the proposed new Local Government Act. I must admit I've previously had concerns with 2-member wards with only one vacancy for election every 2 years, as this potentially allows a minority candidate to get elected if the majority vote is split between other candidates. However, the introduction of preferential voting removes that concern. But with larger wards, it is important that the precinct system is reviewed, reactivated and reinvigorated, especially where there are distinct differences between communities within the ward. Most clearly, for example, between South Fremantle and the CBD in Ward 2 and between north and south of the river in Ward 1. The proposed transitional arrangements, option 1, do concern me as they result in a 2-year period where some councillors were elected to represent existing wards but are allocated to the new wards. And there ceases to be a clear relationship between councillors and electors. Some councillors will be notionally representing people who didn't have the choice whether to vote for them or not. And that might be pragmatic, but I don't think it's democratic. In addition, 2 of the 4 new wards will have 3 councillors for 2023 to 25, when the others will have only 2, which doesn't appear to comply with the Local Government Act requirement for consistent elector-councillor ratios and might well require the Minister for Local Government to overrule the Local Government Advisory Board. Option 1, I believe, is confusing and potentially disempowering for electors and makes it difficult for both elected members and the administration. I believe it would be much better to have a clean break, option 2, with the whole council being elected half for 4 years, half for 2 years at a single time, either in 2023 or 2025. I'd now like to talk briefly about the Swan River Crossings project, which is not on your agenda tonight. On 7th of November 2022, the Bridge Alliance advised that the project teams were working through the outcomes from the Fremantle Council meeting, as well as addressing community sentiment towards the project. And while they were doing that, works would be halted. So my question here is, does the City of Fremantle have any information on when the Bridge Alliance is likely to restart works on the project, and whether the Alliance, in addressing the community sentiment towards the project, is likely to result in changes to the proposed project? And if so, when such changes will be discussed with the community? On 26th of October 2022, Council had resolved to request that the Fremantle Bridge Alliance facilitate a multi-criteria assessment process involving key stakeholders and community representatives. My questions here are, has the Bridge Alliance provided any response to the City of Fremantle on the resolution of the 26th of October, especially that request for an inclusive comparative assessment of options? And secondly, if the Bridge Alliance is unwilling to undertake the requested multi-criteria assessment, will the City of Fremantle commission an independent assessment of options? On the 14th of November 2022...
Ian, you've sort of run out of time a little bit. If you've got your questions in writing, perhaps we could invite you to submit them.
Can I just ask the last question? I won't do the preamble.
Briefly.
Okay. The last question is, has the Bridge Alliance, Main Roads or the Minister for Transport provided any response to the community concerns expressed by the special meeting of electors? If they have, will the City of Fremantle share that response with the Fremantle community? And if not, will the City of Fremantle urgently seek responses so that the Fremantle community is treated with respect and is able to play an informed role in the further development of the project? I have a copy of those notes there.
Thank you. On the first matter that you've raised, I might get the CEO to respond, particularly in terms of, I guess, whether what we're doing is aligned with, the expectations of the LGAB. So, and the second part, if he wishes, as well.
Thank you through the chair. The Manager of Governance has been in constant contact with the department in putting this report together for the city, and we actually gave the department a draft report and our recommendation last week. It's the department who have suggested that the process of bumping in over a 2-cycle period is the preferred one than doing an all-out spill in 2025, which was where we were heading. And of course, the Minister's option is to do a total spill in 23, which Council have asked to go against. So there is a precedence for this. The City of Rockingham undertook a similar approach and received governor consent orders back in 2019 to do something very similar, where they placed current elected members in new wards for the 2-year period.
To the second part of the question, not to my knowledge, effectively, we haven't had a reply. I think a lot of people are on leave at the moment. Yeah. We'll take that one, I guess, on notice. Thank you. And the final speaker is Mark Warren. Now, Mark is speaking on a confidential item, so I just would suggest that perhaps we don't ask any questions that may lead to the content of the confidential report. Thanks, Mark. You've got 3 minutes.
Thank you, and thank you, councillors, for the opportunity to speak. This relates to item C2301-9, which is in relation to the heritage matter of 49A John Street, which we're about to discuss towards the end of the meeting in private. Just to give you a bit of background, my name is Mark Warren. This is my wife, Holly, behind me, with our son, Maury, and we've got 2 other kids. We purchased 49A John Street in North Fremantle in October 21, and we moved in 22. Many people in this room are aware of the situation regarding the heritage listing of the house. So when we purchased it, we asked the real estate agent if it was heritage listed, and they said it wasn't. That's because they did a check in the Inherit database, and they found no evidence of the address in that database. So she told us that it wasn't heritage listed. So we purchased the house. It's a 2-bedroom cottage. It's for myself, my wife, and 3 young sons, and we bought it specifically with the intention to develop it. Shortly after we moved in, I was made aware through an application to put up a garden shed that the house was in fact heritage listed. So this was mainly because the listing in the Inherit database was listed as Fremantle and not North Fremantle. And it was the same in the city's heritage list as well. It was stated as Fremantle and not North Fremantle. So it wasn't searchable in the database. I raised it with the city. They acknowledged the error, but maintained that any development would have to be in line with the heritage requirements of the area. The restriction, I won't go into the details of the house, but the restriction given by the heritage listing, it means that we can't develop the house in the way that we planned to do when we bought it. The city has helped us in some ways. We've had plenty of meetings, email discussions, etc. However, the city and the insurers seem to date have ignored the written evidence and either blamed us or the real estate agent for the error, when it's clearly stated in black and white that the error is to the city's account. This has caused us enormous stress. This is a $1.2 million house. I'd equate it to buying a Ferrari and then finding out afterwards that it's limited to 100 k's an hour. This is a serious investment for us, and then it was not as described in the purchase, and through no fault of our own. If we had known at the time that the house was heritage listed, we would not have purchased it. It would not be suitable for us. It would not have allowed a development that we needed and that we wanted at the point when we bought the house, which was our intention. We have no choice now but to sell the property. Any development that would be allowed by the heritage restriction is not compatible with our needs. It's not economically viable. As it stands, we're stuck living in a house that we can't renovate and we can't sell due to the associated costs. We're here. I've written a letter to Glenn in November. We had a meeting with Glenn, and we asked the City of Fremantle to compensate us for the purchase costs of the house, which we intend to sell as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. That brings us, I think, to the end of public question time. I haven't heard of any petitions, deputations, special deputations, or presentations, so let me know now if anyone else has. Otherwise, I will go to the confirmation of minutes. I'll move that we confirm. Is everyone comfortable with the minutes from the last council meeting? Yep. I'll move that we confirm the minutes from the ordinary meeting of council from 14th of December, seconded by Councillor Archibald. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Okay, is there any elected member communication? All good. That's going to take us through to reports and recommendations from officers. I might go to Councillor Jones as chair of the Planning Committee to move and introduce the first item, which is the Woolstores development, and just remind him to get a seconder.
Yes, I'll move the officer's recommendation on item 1, Cantonment Street 28. Seconder. Okay, I'll just make a few introductory comments. I'll just foreshadow
seconded by Councillor Moughlin, just for the minutes.
A very minor amendment I'll put forward, but just for the benefit of councillors who may not be aware that this part of the site is subject to this application, which is a JDAP application. At the same time, there's a separate application to the State Development Assessment Unit, and the council's been provided with no information about that at all, except that there is an application. So we're not sure which part of the site it is or what the building is, and just want to make people aware of that. And then the third part of the site is not subject to any application at all that we're aware of. So would this be an appropriate time to move the amendment, or to? Yeah. So the amendment is quite simple. It simply states that the plans as shown in several places indicate buildings up to 14 stories high in stages 2 and 3, greyed out in the background of the buildings. And I just want to make it clear that they are not part of this application, sort of stated obviously It is stated in the report, but not in the actual recommendation, just to make doubly sure that there's no assumption or implication in the future that nobody minded all this and that it was okay. So it's.
So that's seconded by Councillor Thompson.
Thank you. So that's really all I've got to say. Yep.
So on the amendment, any further discussion on that? Fairly straightforward, so I'll put that one to a vote. All those in favour? And that's unanimous. So back to the item as amended. Perhaps I will take over chairing from here. Councillor Pemberton, perhaps did you want to go to your amendment next? I think that's on the screen behind my head or in your additional documents. Seconder for Councillor Pemberton's, yep, seconded by Councillor Thompson. Do you want to speak to that?
Sure, look, not a lot needs to be said really, but I think the DAC did provide some useful input around their suggestion of creating some access to air and natural air and light, which I think is probably achievable in a car park type scenario. So I hope that that can be integrated into the plan.
Any further discussion on the amendment? Councillor Jones, your light is on. If you, yep, thank you. All right, so we'll put that one to the vote. All those in favour? Yep, and against? Councillor Sullivan and Vusic against, and that's carried. So we might continue on with the amendments because I suspect this is where we're going to have the large part of any discussion. So I have put in an amendment to delete condition 9, which is around the building setback. So I'll go to move that amendment. Is there a seconder? Councillor Mofflin. I think in terms of my thinking around this, and I think I've communicated this to elected members, but for the sake of transparency, I did spend quite a lot of time walking down on the site, looking at previous plans, including Frio 2029, considering, I guess, all the adjoining infrastructure and proposed adjoining infrastructure, such as the bus port, Wallyallup Court, how we might manage traffic in this area. And I struggle to see a justification for such a significant road width. I looked back at the 2029 documents that came out of Amendment 49, and I think at that time it was envisaged as being a kind of high-end retail boulevard. I don't think that's exactly what we would see now. I don't know that that's what we would envisage for that now, even though we do definitely want it to be a really clear and conducive urban realm that brings people through from the train station and from the new bus port to the heart of the city. But, you know, would we support on-street parking there? No, I don't think we would. I think that's generally not the strategy that we're pursuing with parking anyway. Would we need bus pull-in bays there? No, we wouldn't, because it's right next to the bus port, and surely we've been wanting to get people to go to the bus port to get on the bus. I did follow up a question that I think Councillor Pemberton or someone raised about access to the potential hotel development on this site and whether that would happen off Queen Street, and the response I got was no, it's designed to be off Elder Place, not Queen Street. So I'm struggling to make a strong and coherent argument for why we need more than 4 metres, 4 point whatever it is meters, of footpath on this side of the road. So with all that in mind, respecting the work that has been done through Amendment 49 and that times have also perhaps changed a little bit, I feel comfortable that we're going to have significant space on both the footpath and in the road reserve for what we need to do in terms of 1 lane of traffic in each direction, cycle movements as they come into the sort of slower CBD, and really clear access way through to Wallyallup Court. So that's why I'm moving that amendment. Councillor Mofflin, did you wish to speak next as a seconder or go to broader?
I won't speak, but I will ask a question of officers first. And just to confirm, if this condition is deleted, what would the curb to building space be? And I know the proponent spoke about that earlier to suggest it was 4+ meters, but it would be good to get a sense of that from yourself.
Thanks.
Through the chair, that's roughly correct. So it'd be close to 5 meters on the current design of the road. Obviously, if further works are done to Queen Street, that may well change, but on the current scenario, yeah.
Perhaps just as a follow-on question, while you've got the microphone, or whether the director wants to respond, in terms of creating urban realm that takes us through from the train station to Wallylup Court, to the director, I guess, do you feel comfortable with that space that's been allocated, giving us sufficient room to do that?
Thank you, and through the chair, we also agonised a little bit about the width here, and I think from a functional point of view, the street works as it currently does, and it would work with the 2 meters. From a technical point of view, it came down to what was in the policy and whether or not the design was any better. But in terms of how the street would function, we have no problem with the fact that it would work very satisfactorily both for movement and for public realm.
Thank you. Councillor Sullivan.
Thank you. As one of, I think, only 2 elected members that was here during Amendment 49, I'm not sure if Councillor Pemberton arrived before it was finalised, but I might be wrong. This is a really difficult one. The comment that was just made by the director, I would tend to agree with, in the sense that under current circumstances, given the street as it is now, functioning as a fairly minor road and not much else, perhaps some leeway would be appropriate. At the time of Amendment 49, it was also the time when we were starting to contemplate what needed to happen at the rail station, and therefore what needed to happen with Queen Street in terms of providing access to the station. And the initial advice from the PTA was always that, well, if we're going to reroute our buses into Queen Street, all of the buses heading in and out in that direction and crossing over into the new bus port to the northeast, we would need to prioritise the bus connectivity to there, and we wouldn't want to be seeing buses caught up in roundabouts or traffic lights and the like, unless they had priority. So one of the things that was being considered at the time was, well, how are you going to do that with 1 lane in each direction? Is this going to end up needing to be a space that has a bus lane to get through, so that buses could be prioritised to get through to a new bus port? PTA were really clear. If a millisecond is added to the route, they won't support changing the bus routes. And we know PTA always have that attitude, that every second counts and that you can't add time. So that was one of the concerns raised at the time. And yes, the street works and you can have quite wide verges with 1 lane in each direction. But the issue is what happens when we go to negotiate finally and we then find out that PTA are still sticking to their guns and saying they have to prioritise. I've discussed this with the director and the urban designers, and certainly one of the approaches is, well, maybe you just don't have cars going through there, which is not completely unreasonable, but we haven't made that decision. The community hasn't made that decision. We haven't even looked at the consequences of what that then does to traffic movement throughout the whole city. What does that cut off? What opportunities, what are the pros and cons of making major modifications like that to our transport network? And so I don't say traffic, transport, pedestrians, cyclists, buses, and then cars. So that's why the 3.65 metres came about, because there was this belief that a reasonable width is required for that public realm. On the other issues that were in there is, again, the comment was, well, as it currently stands with the curbs in the current location, it works okay, and we'll get a 5 metre or near 5 metre wide verge, which is what you're kind of like looking for pedestrians. So I accept that point of view. But the median strip running down the middle of that road is, I think, about 0.9 of a metre, 0.8 of a metre, 0.7 of a metre, something like that. If you were seeking streets like Adelaide Street, where the median strip is about 1.8, 2 metres, something like that, that's the sort of width that you actually need for safe pedestrian crossing if it is a road, because that's the sort of distance that your bike is. So if you're wheeling your bike across, you've got a median that you can actually park your bike in without sort of having to turn the wheel at right angles. It's also the sort of width that a parent with a pram might also need, or a person with a shopping trolley, or any other of those sort of scenarios. So from an urban design point of view, that is why we put in the wider thing, because we felt that we would end up needing more space for the carriageway and the median sooner or later, and therefore what would then be compromised is the pedestrian space. And you couldn't have these higher intensity buildings with interactive shop fronts and a 2 metre wide footpath. Just wasn't going to be feasible. So if we were going to do the intensification of the area, the significant intensification of the area, that we would also need to see wider road space. The other thing was that that was very clear in terms of delivering Amendment 49 and significant increases in both building height and facade heights, was that we needed to be careful about the ratio between the street width and the facade height. And a 1-to-1 ratio was essentially the ratio that was looked for. So if you're going to have a 5-storey building or a 6-storey facade, then you need to have a wider street. It's fine if you've got a 2-storey building in the West End or an effective 3-storey building to have a narrower street. It works. But you start putting the bigger buildings in, overshadowing the space that's between the buildings, the sense of a tunnel starts to become an issue. And again, that was allowing the higher buildings, and the was compensated for by, in the one street that didn't have a reasonable width, by putting in place a setback. And that's probably the more reasonable request for the setback. What I get from the applicant, and I would expect it from every applicant, so I'm not singling them out, is that I've paid for my land and I want to be able to develop it. It's a perfectly reasonable argument. And it's a perfectly reasonable argument to say to the city, if you're the applicant, if you want the land, buy it, resume it. That's what the city should do. There is a reasonable argument for that, and I think I made it at the time. And of course, the city can't afford to buy it. And there is no sort of development fund that we can draw upon to basically start buying millions of dollars worth of land to facilitate a new bus route into the bus port. So I get it from both sides. It's in the scheme. It's not in the policy. It's a scheme requirement. The last thing I would say is that to make the road wider, it's quite clear that the road space needs to be wider. What we did at the time was looked at both sides of the street and what would be the appropriate urban design outcome. And it turned out that the 3.65 metres seemed reasonable on this side of the street, and on the other side of the street, the setback requirement is significantly greater, which did seem particularly harsh on a much smaller lot that didn't have the same uplift that was generated for the Warstall site, because obviously that has the greatest planning uplift through Amendment 49. So my sense is, if I was looking to be generous in not imposing the setback, I'd probably be looking at the other side of the street first, because that's the one that actually has the harsher thing. The dilemma will be, if we set the precedence of a reduced setback, that there's a scheme requirement on this side of the street, what defence do we have
on the other side of the street to defend 5 point whatever meters it is, going down to 2 meters or nil. What defence do we have? It becomes sort of more arbitrary. And so I do have the concern in that sense. Lastly, I would say that there are requirements elsewhere in the site to have east-west links and the like, and they're more policy requirements, and they're less fundamental in terms of the hierarchy of the city. You know, whether Point Street runs through visually, physically, or the like, frankly, is a minor issue compared to getting Queen Street right. And I would even go so far as to say, why is, you know, the street between the Wool Stores shopping centre site and the Wool Stores themselves, the old street, a significantly wide street, the sort of width that you'd actually like in Queen Street, but is completely unnecessary in that street? Is there not some way of just, you know, adjusting the sites so that nobody is worse off? Thank you.
Thank you. Councillors. Councillor Pemberton.
Thank you. I have mixed views about this, and I was deeply involved in the Amendment 49 stuff, even though my term sort of started just as we were finishing it up. And I do recall doing like the walking tours and talking about the logic and the rationale behind all of those things. And I do see some rationale towards kind of dropping that, and certainly in the case that you've put. But one thing that concerns me particularly is so you've just said as the mayor that you don't see it being a retail strip, and I noticed that the plans from the applicant actually indicate that it's al fresco dining the whole way, and there's F&B all the way along, and that just means even more space taken up. And I mean, I have concerns about our entire street being covered, you know, all of our city streets just relying solely on F&B, which is a concern, and having al fresco on every street. But obviously that takes up space, and we know that it's a bit of a challenge on the existing Cappuccino strip, for example, which has a relatively spacious footpath, but once you put tables and chairs out there and then you've got buses going past and so on, it can actually be not a particularly pleasant environment. And I think that the additional space is actually required in order to make sure that you've got buffer zones from that heavy traffic movement, and recognising that the long-term plan is for the buses to access the station through Queen's Street, which means people are not going to want to sit hard up against the edge. But equally so, if you then have a narrowed space for pedestrian movements up and down that street, you know, it creates more potential conflict and so on. With regards to cycling and things like that, I mean, I also think having, you know, good access way to the train station and into the city centre is also really important. And I do note that the City of Perth has got quite a comprehensive plan at the moment, and I will share it around for elected members to have a look, which is actually about recognising that, you know, even though in a CBD kind of environment, you know, you don't necessarily expect high-speed movements of any kind, really. Having some dedicated space and some dedicated routes is actually really important in order to create free-flowing movement for each of the different modes of transport, and making sure that it's safe and comfortable for the people who are lingering in the spaces, which of course we also want. So for me, this is a little bit of an unbalanced one, but at this stage, I'm going to oppose the amendment that's put before us today, because I do think there was a lot of thought that went into the scheme amendment in the first place, as Councillor Sullivan has said. And I do think that even though the reduced setback would probably be fine in the current context, I think in 10 years' time, when we've had more progress on some of the significant things that we're envisaging to take place, we will then be problem solving with what we've ended up with.
Thanks. Councillor Lang.
Thanks. Thank you, Councillor Sullivan, for that detailed background on the history and making me think about things that I did not consider prior to the meeting. Given some of the briefings that we've had on future plans for the bus port and potential change in the bus movements, your argument, I think, is quite strong. I've also got some concerns about what may eventuate over the road and what that public realm will turn into in the future. future, and not knowing about the bus, not knowing what's going to happen over the road, I'm concerned we may hinder any future development for any future council, and we may create an environment which isn't attractive for pedestrians or anyone using that area. So I'm probably leaning towards not supporting this amendment.
Councillors. Councillor Moughlin.
Yep. Okay. Thank you. Yeah, and thanks, Councillor Sullivan, for sharing some of the history around Amendment 49. Often hear that thrown around, but don't get the narrative associated with it. But in this instance, I actually think that the space which is allocated as part of the development is adequate for what we would like to see today, but also tomorrow, and that we would be able to develop a significant space both for pedestrians and use of that land for the various transport modes and routes through there. So I think it's a completely reasonable amendment to have that condition removed.
Thanks. Councillors, comments, questions? Thanks, Councillor Graham.
Yeah, look, we've already heard from the officers that the setback is 4.9. So the applicant's asking for 5.65. So we're actually talking 750 mil here, which is, I'm not a carpenter, but I reckon it's about that width of the table. So, I mean, a lot of words have gone into the pros and cons of what Scheme 49 and everything was. But I mean, the amount of things we relax as a council at planning and in the council and in the greater good of Fremantle. I mean, this is very, when you're looking at 750 mil for a development like this, to me, this is a very insignificant thing to consider. And, the notion that this is a boulevard and all this, and it was made to look nice and everything, it still can be made to look nice. You don't have to worry about what's going on the other side of the road tonight. That'll remain a car park mostly for the next 20 years. So, they're making enough money out of that to come to council and try and get something approved. So I think we should really, I mean, it's not taking the bull by the horns. I just think it's a sensible thing to do. We need this activated. We need this Woolstores area to become something. And it will become something, and I think it'll become something that Fremantle will come to love. And for 750 mil, I don't think it's worth fighting for.
Thanks, Councillor Graham. Councillor Law, Councillor Jones.
Yeah, I just want to point out that on page 26 of the agenda, it says the item was referred to the PTA, and they had no objection to it, provided there was some discussion about the access to the hotel. So it would seem pretty unreasonable for them to say they have no objection to it and then come back at some point in the future and object to it. The one thing they did insist on is there's no parking on the street, and obviously they don't need bus stops. So I can't see how the PTA can formally say they have no objection to it and then at some point in the future ask for a bus priority or dedicated bus lanes.
Councillor Lorber.
Yeah, can I ask a question about what the exactly the distance that this amendment would change? Councillor Graham said 750 mils. I was under the impression that might be, is that?
I'll get a comment from the officers.
Through the chair, it's so the applicant's seeking a 2 metre setback. They're required to have 3.65, so it's 1.65 metres. That the setback from the lot boundary line is they're seeking.
And to clarify, this is beyond the footpath. So the footpath is how wide?
So the distance from the curb line to the building line as designed is about 4.9 to 5 metres in total.
Thank you. I think that's where the confusion's coming up. Thanks. Back to you, Councillor Lorber.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, so 1.65 meters still isn't a huge amount of space. I would agree with Councillor Graham on that. But when you look at the intensification for this area, which we all want to see. We want to see development here. We don't want to see it be an empty lot forever. And trying to fit in buses and people, and as was mentioned, even al fresco, that bit of space actually can make a big difference between feeling comfortable sitting out and having a coffee and or riding your bike or walking, or being right next to buses going past. And um, you know, I would really like to. I mean, this is a big site. This is a huge site, and I just wonder if there was. We don't really know what's happening on the other parts of it, but it seems a bit odd to me that this couldn't be accommodated by moving other things around without seeing the rest of it. It seems to be it's just a feeling that I have. But yeah, as we intensify the use here, we're going to need to keep that space that's available for people and all that stuff. And the other thing is just the precedents. I kind of worry about. I've heard a lot about precedents in this past year and planning decisions and having to be consistent. And if we do this here, perhaps an officer comment, would we be inclined to have to accept this on the other side of the street or further down the street? Or is that something that we might be basically backing ourselves into?
I'll get a comment for you on that one.
Through you, Chair, you wouldn't be obliged to, but it would be a difficult argument to make in varying one side of the street and not the other. They do have two different setback requirements, though, and further down the line, when a development comes to us, there might be more resolution around what council would like Queen Street to look like. So there might be other elements. So it'd be a bit of speculation, but it's a reasonable argument to make.
Anything further? Oh, good. Councillor Vusic?
Look, I'm not going to go over a lot of good comment that was made on this particular motion. I think 1.6 is a lot. I think given the location where it is, we need to keep our options open, because certainly 1.6 metres, if I apply the logic, that's only 1.6 or 750, which is 3/4 of a metre. If we apply that to some of the curbs that we've got in public space and on South Terrace with some of the F&B offerings, I can assure you that it would make a huge difference in terms of the pedestrian and give you a lot more elbow room to be able to fit all the other modes of transport that one would expect in a modern city, and with some perhaps some changes in the next decade or so in that transport mode. So I'm inclined to oppose it.
Councillors? No? Okay. Well, that means I will close. So I want to address a few things that have been raised by people during the debate. I wanted to get a comment probably from the director about the median strip width and whether we would feel comfortable that there would be sufficient room in the perhaps it's yeah, to accommodate a wider median that would be friendly to bicycles and other long users.
Thank you, Mayor. Through the chair, if, as the applicant has pointed out, if the setback on the other side was proportional to the 2 metre setbacks being sought on this side, you would end up with a road of 20 metres. With 20 metres, you can do a lot with it. I've just done a little sketch here. You can have 6 metres on each footpath, 4 metre wide road width, which is more than enough for buses. 3.5 would probably do it. And you can play with that proportionally any way you want. So to answer the question, yes, you could put a wider median in of 1.2, and Councillor Sullivan's absolutely right. If you're going to have a median, make it wide enough so that you can use it, so it's safe for bicycles and people pushing prams, and then you would take that back off of the road width and or footpath width. So you can play with those dimensions in either way. I think the critical thing technically for me is if you're looking for more road lanes, 4 lanes, then yes, you will need more width. Speaking from experience, I've done streetscape upgrades in Perth, Hay Street, King Street, all much narrower than this, and they work. But only if you take some of that traffic space out. If you want 4 lanes of traffic, then you probably need a wider road. Other than that, it will work.
Thank you. So I guess that addresses some of the concerns I, would have after listening to everyone's comments. I mean, I cannot see a reality where we would support 4 lanes on Queen Street, and I would be really surprised if this council did. I also don't know that we want Queen Street to be the bus funnel out of the city. I actually think the fact that buses go in a couple of different directions when they leave the bus port is a good thing, and we should continue to make sure that happens, including Market Street and potentially Beach Street as well. We're going to reduce the travel, like the move of the bus port to the to this side of the train station is going to save a heck of a lot of minutes because they're not trying to get through the Market Street traffic snarl. I mean, surely that is adding 10 minutes to some bus routes. Whereas, if we're talking about having to slow down a little bit through an urban area on their last leg to the bus port, I can't see the PTA really pushing back too heavily on that. And as it was in the report, they haven't raised any concerns with this. The issues around alfresco versus a retail, I said a retail boulevard, and I guess what I was referring to is the image that kind of is a little bit Champs-Élysées. I'm not sure that that's what we're going to create in this area. Much as I, would love some of those big brands to come to Fremantle, it's probably not really consistent with our economic development or, kind of where the world's at. I mean, in regards to the alfresco, we're talking about 4.9 metres from the building to the curb and potentially more. As the director says, we've got room to play with here. The cappuccino strip alfresco is accommodated in significantly less room than that. Would it be nicer for it to have more room? Sure. Does it need more than 4.9 metres? I'm struggling to see it. I think, and this is always very difficult because we have to think about precedent, we have to think about long term, we have to think about eventualities that we don't know yet. But I think on the flip side, the commercial aspect of this is that where we throw around, 4.9 to 5.6, it would be nice to have that to play with. It's not playing on the other side of the fence. It's the commercial reality of will these sort of developments go ahead or not. And it really does square meterage when you look at it in that light. It's a stop or go conversation. So I would be really concerned if we had a really clear and coherent plan that said, we know that what we want to do on this street and what we want to achieve is X, Y, and Z, and we categorically need this space and able to do that, then fair enough. I wouldn't move to delete this condition. But we don't have that clear plan. We can't turn around and say to the proponent or to the market or to the community, here's what we want to do and here's why we need this amount of space. But if we take it just in case and as a result, this is no longer a commercial development, that really worries me. Because, sometimes we have to do difficult things because we've got a plan and it's long term and it's strategic and we've got a clear picture of that, and it does hurt, various people, and that's part of our jobs. But in this case, where there is no clear plan, we can't coherently turn around and say, this is what we need this land for. I find it very difficult. So that's why I have moved to delete the condition. It hasn't been without a lot of thought and a lot of discussions, a lot of advice from staff, because clearly I wouldn't want to do anything that would put us in a compromised position into the future. Sometimes you have to make some tough calls in any kind of governance role, and I think this is one of them, because as a general rule, I would follow the previous predecessors' work that's been done on these kind of things. But here I can't put a coherent argument together to say this street width is more important than this development going ahead. So I'm going to put this one to a vote. All those in favour of the amendment? And against? So that's lost. Okay. Do you need the names? We might just put your hands back up for the amendment. Might be easier. So that's Councillors Mofflin, Jones, Fitzharding, Kamada, and Graham. Thanks. So back on the item, is there any further debate? Councillor Lang?
I'm in full support of this development. I was in full support of the 2018 version. We've seen a few iterations. Well, it's changed. I just want to say thanks to you guys for persevering with this over so many years, so many different designs. I can't wait to see you guys break ground and transform that into Freo. So thanks for sticking with it.
Others? Yeah, likewise. Thanks for sticking with it, and I hope you do. We'll put the item to a final vote. All those in favour? And that's unanimous. Thanks. Okay, that is going to, so because we've got people in the gallery for the ward boundary review, I think I'll go to that one next, if that's all right with everyone. Yep. Okay, so I will move the officer's recommendation on the amended, I'll move the amended officer's recommendation. So just to be clear, there were some words added into that, which were the result of the discussions with the Local Government Advisory Board, I believe, just to be absolutely clear about the implementation plan. So that's the one that is on page 7 in your additional documents. So I'm going to move that recommendation. Yep, seconder for that one, Councillor Mofflin. Okay, now we've got a couple of amendments here, one from Councillor Lorver that was received first. So does anyone want to speak on the item generally, or do we want to go to those amendments? Councillor Lorver?
I just had a quick question. Would there be, and I understand why the staff put this forward after consultation with the local government folks, was there any reason why councillors couldn't nominate which ward that they wanted to potentially serve in? What is the reason for being so prescriptive in saying these people have to go to this certain area?
Okay. Sorry, just to be clear, we've got a seconder for the motion. This isn't an amendment at this point, so it's a question. Yeah. Sorry, just making sure minutes is staying with us. So the question to the staff, CEO, get that? Why could you not choose your ward?
Through the chair, the position that was suggested by the department is that you move the current serving elected member to the closest new presented ward, and that's what we've proposed in this recommendation.
All right. Anything further on the amended officer's recommendation that's been moved? No. So we'll go to the proposed amendment. So Councillor Lorver, did you want to move yours? No, I've moved the amended officer's recommendation. Yeah, rather than the one in the initial agenda. Yeah, but there is a second amendment there, and that might be where you're. I don't know if you're wondering about that, but that was so the basis of some other discussions that you may want to just reflect on. That's there if we want it. It's not. I haven't moved that at this stage. Yeah, so page 7, but not page 8 in the additional docs. Making sure we're all on the same page, literally. Councillor Lorver.
Is there a seconder?
Just tell people what you're moving.
Well, I'd like to move the amendment, although it would be slightly different with the officers' changes to the report. The information would have to flow through where it's where it's relevant.
Yep. So does anyone want to second Councillor Oliver's? Yep, Councillor Archibald. Yep.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's just really simple. It's just changing the name of one of the wards. If another potential amendment gets up, these names will all be temporary. But I just think that looking at the potential changes, if this entire thing gets up, there's no, in my mind, reason to really avoid this consistency with the majority of the area that is Ward 4. It's been Hilton Ward. The changes that are being proposed just adds more of Hilton to the Hilton Ward. It includes parts of Hilton Park. I guess if we had recommended changing all the names, I would be open to looking at that at this point, but we're not. Or if there was a theme running through them as to why we would want to change Ward 4 from Hilton to East, but there really isn't a theme. So I just really feel like keeping it Hilton for now is the way to keep the most minimal confusion for residents, especially in that area. Thank you.
Councillors, did anyone else want to speak on this one? Councillor Mofflin.
So I'm most probably, well, rather I'm going to split Hilton Ward here and suggest that most probably, or rather I don't support maintaining the name of Hilton Ward as much as I think it's an important recognition of the area. We are moving away from suburb names as part of naming these wards. So, we're not going to maintain Beaconsfield Ward. The Hilton Ward currently contains Hilton, Sampson, O'Connor, and will include parts of Beaconsfield as part of the change. And this is a temporary change. So I think it's important to maintain consistency with the rest of the naming conventions that we are putting in place. And so I really look forward to actually, these being temporary and us coming up with other names, but I don't think maintaining the name of Hilton really adds anything to us as part of the change.
Councillor Lang.
I don't exactly agree with the naming conventions as they stand either, but I do think, looking at the map now, Ward 4 or East Ward, a lot of it is in Beaconsfield, and I think that is confusing for people who've been in Beaconsfield, and similar to my experience with North Ward, that's confusing because I don't live in North Fremantle. So, I mean, even if it was Northern Ward and Eastern Ward, that might eliminate some confusion. But at this stage, I'm just going to accept what we've got on the table for this part of the process, and hopefully at a later date we can get some better names for the process that are maybe less confusing or not suburb specific.
I'd almost countenance a minor amendment that adds to the end of some of the words here. So I don't know, think about if you want to move it. I don't support maintaining Hilton Ward because I think it then opens the question of should we have a whole bunch of other suburbs that are the dominant suburb in a ward, giving their name to that ward. If you ask people in the current East Ward what ward they're in, they'll say White Gum Valley. It just opens a whole can of worms. So I'm just really keen to crack on with renaming them. But if it were to make people feel more comfortable to use Eastern rather than East, given that we have an East Ward, I think that could be, something we could consider anyway. Councillor Pemberton.
Look, I like that direction. I shared the concerns around the adoption of the term Hilton Ward, given that it is going to include a lot of Beaconsfield and the confusion that already creates. But then when I realised that East Ward is what we're going to call Central Ward, and then I realised, that's even more confusing to have a former name used in a different location. So I would definitely support the minor amendment that was suggested to turn it into Northern Ward and Eastern Ward. So at least there is a cue there that this is new. This is not the same terms that we were used to, and therefore it is a better kind of placeholder You know, it's not particularly eloquent or anything, but it's a good holding pattern that indicates to every single resident in every single area that this is a new system.
Okay, well, we can't amend an amendment, so I will carry on the amendment, but open to that. Any further discussion? Did you want to close, Councillor Lorber?
Yeah, I just have a different view on this. I mean, we're looking at having temporary names. So we're looking at changing the name of an existing ward that were just basically added an entire suburb that is in the name. And then taking a name of an existing ward and putting it over it, whether it's East or Eastern, and then maybe a few years down the track, changing it again. I just think that's the most confusing path that we could adopt, rather than just keeping, it as close to as what we can. Because North Ward, we're not changing that because it's still North Fremantle and bits. Keep Hilton Ward in my mind, Hilton and some bits, and then when we go to change the names and go through a proper process, then we can go through that process and change them, and I'm open to that. I just think this is actually probably the most confusing for people. That grab an existing name of a ward that's being abolished, move it to an area that has not had any of the East Ward in it or Eastern Ward in it, and then a couple of years later, then changing it again. I know this is really minor, but I just think if we wanted to confuse people, this would be the way that I would go. But the amendment would fix that. So if this is temporary, it really shouldn't matter. But hopefully we can just have some consistency. Thank you.
Okay, I'll put that amendment to the vote. All those in favour? Yeah, 1, 2. And against? And so, did we get the names? So Councillor Lorber and Busick for? Yeah. And so that's lost. Now, the CEO thinks that I have moved everything on page 7 and page 8, which is the new boundaries. Interesting. No, it's not what I intended to do. I intended to move what is on page 7. Yeah, so just to be absolutely clear for everyone, the amendments that are included on page 7 of the additional documents are what I've moved. I haven't moved the change of boundary for East/Hilton and Central Ward that's characterised on page 8. So I just want to be clear that this came out of the discussion, I think, and some concerns people raised about the Hilton/East Ward being unlikely to grow beyond the current size and all the other wards likely to grow. So officers drafted up a version which puts more of Beaconsfield into East Ward and therefore moves the boundary on the south side further towards Coastal Ward, and got advice that I think that the ratios might be acceptable, even though it would throw that one to being a little bit out. That is written on page 8, so I'm just letting you know this now in case anyone who raised those concerns wants to move that as an amendment, because it's captured there. And you would have got an email from the Manager of Governance about that. Okay, we're good? Councillor Pemberton.
I don't know whether or not I need to move it to speak about it or.
Give it a go. Which one are you doing? 8 or the Eastern /
Page 8.
Okay.
The change of borders.
Yeah, let's. I think it's probably, given that it was something that people raised and wanted explored, they're really happy for you to move that and put it on the table, and then we can have a discussion about it.
Yep.
Okay, so you were going to move that one. Do we have a seconder for that? Councillor Archibald? Councillor Pemberton?
Okay, and firstly I'd like to thank officers for doing that piece of work for us and having a jig with the numbers and so on. I do think that this is potentially, a step in the right direction. I'm not sure that it's quite right yet, though. That's my only concern. I guess with the knowledge of the development that's taking place in North Ward and particularly around North Freo and so on, I'm still concerned that is you know, I think we've got East Ward right, put it that way, or Ward 4. I'm a little bit concerned that North Ward is still significantly higher, and even though you've got the heart of Beaconsfield in Central Ward, in North Ward you've got obviously the McCabe Street area, you've got Leighton Beach, and you've also currently got the Knutsford Street precinct and so on. And to me, it would make sense to perhaps move the Central Ward boundary to High Street, if that's feasible, to kind of start to even those up. But I don't know, it's jigging around the edges. I think this is better than where we started, but I still have a little bit of concern.
I might get the CEO to comment because a fair bit of work was done, I think, exploring that after Monday.
Okay, great, thanks.
So just through the chair, I think the challenge we had was to try and put some of that area alongside the Fremantle Golf Course section from Stephens through to High Street up into or down into the Central Ward from the North Ward. The challenge with that is the discrepancy in the allocation became a little bit too big. I think it was around 13 or 14% out, and we thought that was probably a little bit too big to argue for. So in this case, we feel that the comments against the Central Ward and the possibility, or the more likely possibility, of seeing development through the heart of Beaky was probably a stronger argument, and it was closer to the 10% mark.
All right, so on the amendment then, and just if anyone needs clarity or wants to, get officer comment, I appreciate this work's been done in the last few days at the request of a number of elected members, and the map on the back should give you some, visual idea of what we're talking about, of the additional docs, which was on the desk. Councillor Sullivan.
Thank you. I just wondered whether the mover and seconder would be interested in, I'm not sure whether you did it, whether you would also just change the north and east to northern and eastern as part of this amendment. Seems logical, you can sneak it in, it's a minor change. It makes a lot of sense to me not to use current names, and I certainly support the Mayor's proposed amendment, which hopefully will come, which will make these names just temporary names and allow us to do a proper job to deliver some proper names. So just a suggestion, rather than having to move a separate amendment.
I was actually considering tacking it onto my amendment, which we haven't debated yet. This includes it, yeah. Well, are the mover and seconder comfortable to do that? Yep, so northern, eastern. We okay with that from a minutes perspective? Yep, okay. Back to the discussion, Councillor Lorber.
Just a quick question. What is the acceptable deviation in the Local Government Act? 10? This is slightly outside of that.
Yep, so do you want to comment on that in terms of what the process would be to put this forward?
So as part of our response to the Local Government Advisory Board, we'll put the argument through that it is likely that we'll see development in the heart of Beaconsfield, which will improve the numbers in the Central Ward and bring that deviation down as time progresses till the next review. Yep, so under the Local Government Act, we're required to review ward boundaries at least every 8 years. What we'd like to do is put something in place that gets us to that 8-year mark, I suppose, without having to do anything prior to that. We believe we could argue the numbers pretty much here. And because it's so close to 10, we believe that the board would probably accept that.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Councillor Mofflin?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I suppose I don't most probably share the same optimism in regards to the Heart of Beaconsfield development coming on as quickly as might be suggested. And I think actually the numbers there in Beaconsfield is most probably significantly lower and would remain lower for a period of time. And to think about an 8-year review cycle and all the development that actually needs to go on in North Ward and Central Ward, I most probably, or rather do support the original plan that we had. And yeah, we could argue around the edges about where those lines are, but I think this most probably throws it out a little too far. I thought we had the balance pretty right on the previous one.
Thank you. Councillors? Any further comments? Yeah, Councillor Kamada.
Yeah, just a quick comment. I tend to support Councillor Moughlin in what he's saying. I do think it would be better to stick with figures that are more equitable, and as the CEO has said, there will be adjustments further down the track, and yeah, I think that's a better way to go.
Councillor Jones?
A question, please. When the CEO says we have to do an adjustment every 8 years, can we option do one anytime we want?
That's the minimum requirement, so yes, you can do them anytime you like.
So if no one else is going to speak, I'm fairly on balance on this one. I'm not particularly invested one way or the other. I mean, I think the observation that was made that it's going to be difficult for Hilton as a suburb to grow because most of the infill has been done, and we're certainly not seeing anything like, I guess, the optimistic view of a transport-orientated development at the Paget Street, South Street lights. That sort of area, that's not on the cards. Samson doesn't look like there's anything that would dramatically change the population there, and neither does O'Connor. So I can see the argument that if we were going to have a ward that was bigger, this would be the one, because all the other wards have significant infill opportunities that we are currently aware of. That said, we have to review it again anyway at some point in time, and you know, if we really felt it was getting out of whack, you know, that opportunity exists. Wards only matter at elections. I think that's the other thing we've got to remember. It's under the Act. We all represent all of these wards at the end of the day, and it just means that somebody's going to knock on a few more doors than somebody else, and so be it. I probably don't even know which way I'm going to vote at this point on this one. Councillor Jones, you had a question, or Councillor Lawver, did you have?
That's another question. Is there any opportunity to take more time just on the ward boundaries? Can we submit the thing and say we'd like to do a bit more time on the ward boundaries? Because I think there is a lot. I mean, I'm just looking at the whole of the Burt Street developments in North Ward, apart from everything else. You know, I mean, I can see 3,000 new voters in the Northern Ward in the next 2 or 3 years. You know, so they've got all of Matilda Bay, one Steel, the new one that's just come in from McCabe Street. There's one you haven't seen yet, and all of the Burt Street development. So that adds up to about 3,000. You know. That's without the next bit of Leighton as well. So I just wonder if we could take another week, maybe a special workshop or something, or whether we have to have these boundaries as part of the resolution tonight.
Through the chair, you do need to put a resolution to the board that has boundaries and a map, absolutely, and numbers, so they can understand the deviation. I guess my advice is we could continue this journey for months, to be fair, and tweak every street just about. So, you know, maybe the old adage of, you know, the perfect and the good being enemies might be the adage in this case. I understand, and I agree with you, there is some development in progress, and some of it probably is more predictable than others, to be fair. You don't have to wait the entire 8 years if it becomes uncomfortable, and you can make some adjustments tonight, absolutely, if you want to. If you want to have a special council meeting in 2 weeks' time and rejig it again, you can. We have to be in by the 14th of February, so there is still time. Albeit that, yeah, maybe the perfect and the good are in competition here at the moment.
Councillor Lawver?
Yeah, I agree with Councillor Moughlin and Councillor Kamada that this potential change just kind of throws it too far out of whack for myself personally. Knowing that we can, if these developments do come online and they do get built with the plans that we have before us or plans that we haven't seen yet, we can always make the change at that point in time. I think the previous version is closer to, closer to something that is more equitable or more even. I guess not equitable, but more even. It's never going to be perfect. I wouldn't have drawn these lines in the exact same way and all that, and that's fine. But you know, if we're going to debate hypothetical or potential developments, we could also talk about businesses potentially registering electors to vote. And so there's a lot of things that we can talk about that are possible in the future. But for here today, I think the staff did a pretty good job in recognizing the main streets and the boundaries on the previous map and all that. And so, yeah, I don't know that I can support this change over that. But if those developments do come online, and I'll be encouraging that they do, we can always adjust the boundaries at that time.
Thank you. All right. So, Councillor Pemberton, did you want to close on this one?
I will, as so much as I'll hedge my bets. I mean, I agree. I think this is not quite right yet as well. I really wish that Councillor Jones's suggestion that we could have just a little bit more time to actually refine this so that we did end up with a scenario that we're happy with. You know, either way, whichever way this vote goes, I don't actually really care much because I don't think either of them are particularly perfect. Like, they're not right yet. I think where we've ended, I think by changing it to Northern Ward and Eastern Ward is a positive. I think the East Ward being what it, or the Ward 4 being what it currently is in this amendment is right. I do think that further refinement between Central Ward and North Ward would be a much better outcome. But if we don't have the ability to do that, then we've just got a second best scenario and it'll work.
All right, I'll put that one to a vote. All those in favour? 3, I think, and against. So that's lost. Got the names, okay? Yep, great. That means that the change to the ward names is also lost. So I'm going to move my amendment, which is on page 6 of the additional documents. And I'm going to add an amendment to 2B to change north to northern and east to eastern. Apparently not. The question was, can we have Ward 1, Ward 2, Ward 3, Ward 4? And apparently that is not acceptable. So, do you want to answer that?
Just through the chair, when we did present the original draft report to the board, to the department for consideration, they actually asked us to put names to the wards as part of their response.
Mullet the hairstyle or mullet the fish? Councillor Thompson. Sorry, Councillor Jones, you were first.
I'm just to try and follow up on this.
So hang on, I just need a seconder. Were you?
Just a question before that, Madam Chair. I mean,
yeah.
Am I right in thinking that that was already moved in the last amendment? In which case you are not able to move it again.
That's very frustrating, isn't it? Because it was lost.
Yes, that's correct. So, yeah.
So therefore it's not a motion.
Seek the CEO's advice on
that. Through the chair, standing orders would normally say that we cannot vote on something that's been voted on already for a period of 3 months.
Okay, so we might conduct a vote on the previous amendment again then, just to make it clear, because I think, yeah, that's what I'm suggesting. So we will vote on the previous amendment with A being the substance that's printed on page 8 and B being the change from north to northern and east to eastern. Is everyone following this? I can't see what's on the screen, so yeah. Okay, so we will take the original vote as being on the boundary. Okay. We're proposing the original vote is on the boundary conversation, and that we take a vote now on part B being the names.
So I'm sorry, Madam Chair, point of order. That wasn't my understanding when I voted on the last one. I was
correct. Okay, so I'm going to call the votes again then, because that's where I was kind of going. Is in
again. I'm not sure you can do that. We have already voted on that one.
Okay. Well, it looks like we're keeping East and North Ward, thanks to procedure. Anyway, it probably makes this amendment more important and relevant. So I will move my amendment, which is that we note that these are only temporary until we can come up with better names, seconded by Councillor Lang. Any discussion on this? Perhaps I can just say in terms of this timeline-wise, I think in order to go through the appropriate processes with Whadjuk Noongar advice, if we were to use Whadjuk names, we're going to need a little bit of time to do that. So there was no way we could kind of do a quick version of that, which is why we don't have those names as part of the motion going forward tonight. But the advice the CEO has given me is that we should be able to fairly easily rename wards at a future stage, and I suspect we won't be orphans in doing this. I suspect there's a lot of other local governments who have come up with a fairly substandard solution and will be coming back with a better one. Councillor Jones.
I'm just wondering what the process is for defining the boundaries. If we can submit what we've just decided tonight, but then build in the revision of the boundaries into the renaming, does the timeline allow to do that, or do we have to wait a year or something? Because it seemed to me we could. It's not going to take a long time to sort out these boundaries. I mean, it's probably a couple of hours sitting with a map, and I think we could sort it out. So if we could build that into the renaming and submit the whole thing together, I just don't know what the timeline is for the boundary process.
Yep, through the chair. I guess you could undertake another review almost straight after this one. The only rider on the next election coming up later this year will be whether we submit any further review we do in a timely process for changes to have occurred before the setting of the election process under the Act. Yeah, it's not. It usually starts towards the end of May.
Can I just follow that question on? Would it be fair to assume that this timeline has been set around whatever gets decided by the 14th of February being in place for the election coming up this year?
Yeah, and through the chair, I was actually asked this question today as well, so I'll elaborate a little bit further. I mean, we presume that the Local Government Advisory Board will consider these in a timely manner, but it's hard to pick just how long they may take as well. So, you know, they may take 2 months to come back to us with the final resolution on this as well.
All right, so are we in a position now to put this amendment as printed on page 6 to a vote? All those in favour? I did get a seconder. Yep, can't remember who it was, but I did. And against? It was Councillor Lang for the minutes. And that's carried unanimously. So we're back on the item as amended. Gosh, fun for those playing at home. Do we have any further discussion on the item as amended? Councillor Graham.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. Yeah, look, I plugged it at the IEM. I'm a great believer that there should only be one ward. I'm going to stick with that. You may think it's a bit of a protest vote, but I do think it has the merit. As the CEO mentioned on Monday night, there will be another review of this, and it sounds like it might be sooner than later. I think it's only sensible that we go to the one ward. I mean, look at the messing around we've had tonight and on a couple of IEMs and all this to get everyone wants a different street or a different name or whatever. If we just had one ward of Fremantle and we got along with it, the City of Perth do it quite sensibly, I believe. Smaller municipalities are being forced into it. So it is the way of the future. I mean, it is only a matter of time before it happens. And in this last week, I've done more for people outside of Beaconsfield Ward than I have in, down in South Ward today for about 2 hours. So, you know, I don't mind. If somebody rings me from Northwood, I'll go and help them. I mean, it depends. People are comfortable ringing people they may know or may have heard of, and I think that's very important. So, you know, there's a whole lot of reasons. I know it's not going to get up, but I won't be supporting this ward boundary representation.
Thanks, Councillor Graham. Councillor Kamada.
Okay, just as Hilton Ward split earlier, Beaconsfield Ward will split. Well, currently Beaconsfield Ward, but obviously this is all going to change. Look, I think Appendix 7, coupled with the Option 1 implementation, makes a lot of sense. It's the least disruptive process. It creates a level of stability in a time of change. And we talk, the only negative impact, as is reported, is that the option, the only negative impact of the option is that it will require a short transitional phase where there will be uneven representation of numbers. But as Councillor Graham just suggested, and I'm pretty sure we're all on the same page, we represent Fremantle in its entirety. And that's the attitude that I've always taken. The awards are for an election process, and it makes it easier to run an election when you're concentrating on a ward, on a smaller area. And I think that allows for better representation, allows more people to be able to participate in that process. So, yeah, with those reasons considered, I'll certainly be supporting this.
Thanks, Councillor Kamada. Councillor Graham, you've still got your mic on, so you might pop that one off. Any further discussion? I guess just in closing, I felt for officers the whole way through this. We've had a very tight time frame set by the department and by the minister. Sometimes that's a great thing to see things being cracked on with, but it certainly made for a pretty intense period for officers trying to understand wants and desires and lines on maps and all that kind of stuff. Check that it was okay from a governance perspective and get a report to us for the first council meeting of the year. So big thank you to officers who I know really worked super hard to do this. A couple of things that I just wanted to mention. I mean, wards under the Act only matter at we all represent all of Fremantle, but I think any barriers to people being able to run for council, so you think about young people, people who don't have good, big resources, are not good things. And having run for the one ward myself, I'd say it's a pretty big undertaking, and I wouldn't want to see everyone who ran for council having to door knock everything from McCabe Street down to the end of South Fremantle. That said, the precinct system, I think, is a really interesting one to point out. And I think because wards only exist at elections, the idea of communities of interest are way more important in terms of how we engage communities. So I think we do need to have a look at that, and we need to decide, how do we want to engage with communities, and should it be based on something that's really quite arbitrary for the case of running an election. I think the precinct system has evolved beyond that anyway, but I think it is something that we could probably have another look at off the back of this as the wards get bigger, to make sure that they really do represent neighbourhoods and communities of interest. So yeah, I'm really grateful to the officers. Nothing is going to be perfect in this. We could all redraw it for another 3 months, I imagine, and still not entirely agree, but we do have the opportunity to review it and to come up with some better names as we go forward. So I'll put that to a vote. All those in favour? And that's, yep, and against? Councillor Graham against. Sorry, you'll have to excuse me, my bad eyesight. I usually close one eye because I can't tell whose hand, but I have to go, which shirt are you wearing over there? So my apologies. Yeah, thank you for wearing different coloured shirts, but my eyesight can be pretty dodgy. Thank you. Okay, so that one is passed. So we'll go back to the agenda in order of the agenda. Holy moly. Okay. Yep, I guess, do people want to speak on item 2? Yep, item 3. Anyone want to speak on 3? Nope, 3 can go on block. 4. Yep. 6, 7 and 8. Does anyone want to, do you want to speak on 6? Great. So I could do, if I'm correct, yeah, I could do 3, 7 and 8 on block. Seconded by Councillor Thompson. All those in favour? Great. Cuts it down a bit. All right, I'll move the officer's recommendation for C 23012, and seconded by Councillor Lang. Councillor Lang, you want to speak on that one?
Thanks. I've got a question. I'm just curious the process in which this arrived. Did the applicant seek retrospective, or did the officers ask them to lodge an application?
Not sure.
Through the chair, I would need to take that one on notice. I believe the applicants have simply lodged an application. They may have had informal discussions, but I don't believe there's an active compliance action out against them.
And the reason that I'm asking is I'm just curious about the process that we've got for approving car parks, because this has happened in the past when we've sought retrospective approval, and through that we discovered that there were other car parks operating in Fremantle that don't have approval either. How important is that? I don't know, but I was wondering if this was approved, could a report be brought back with an updated list of all approved car parks in Fremantle, because I'm aware that there are a handful that are operating without approval.
If council want a report, certainly, but I think we can informally just go and take a review and provide that advice over email in the first instance.
Did you want to speak about this item? Or?
Yeah, it would be then a proposal for a minor amendment to add on to the item.
To
return an updated report with this approval and all other approved car parks for the next OCM.
Yeah, it doesn't quite align with what the... I'll give it to the CEO.
This is a planning item. It needs to be a planning condition for the application. Happy to receive a notice after the resolution of this item.
So perhaps we could take it as an informal request.
Informal request at this stage.
Yep.
And if we can get that report on email in the first instance, that'd be really handy. Thanks.
Cool. Anything on the item? Oh, okay. Councillors, anything on the item? All right, so I'm going to put this one to a vote. All those in favour? And that looks unanimous. Again, I'm winking at you. Okay. Okay, that takes us to C23014, the work placement trainees. I'll move the officer's recommendation, seconded by Councillor Moughlin, and you wish to speak on it?
Yeah, thank you. I just want to acknowledge the work of staff, particularly to bring this to us. It was December year before last where we sat in this room and the proposal around bringing some trainees on board was first suggested. And I think the opportunity that exists both for the city and for those trainees that we bring on board is immense. And I would like to think that, you know, if this is successful, that we're able to implement a system where we roll trainees through the organisation in various guises and able to help young people gain employment in future, whether it is with the City of Fremantle or somewhere else. So yeah, I just really want to commend staff for taking this and running with it, and look forward to seeing the outcomes from it.
Thanks, Councillor Moughlin. Tend to very much agree, and I think it's also nice to be appointing a local training group to be running this, and having them on the ground in Freo providing the support is a really good thing. So I'll put this one to the vote. All those in favour? That's unanimous. That brings us to 6, C23116. I'll move the officer's recommendation, seconded by Councillor Archibald. Councillor Busick, you wish to speak on this, I think?
Yes, I do. I want to firstly acknowledge on page 83, there is an explanation of accounting methods. For me particularly, the finances have been quite a journey over the last couple of years. I think a lot of good work has been done as a result of the continuous improvement. And although the accrual accounting, there is reference to the accrual accounting and the cash basis that we both operate here in the city, I still think we got some distance to go with the accrual accounting. But I particularly want to acknowledge the very last paragraph of that section. and that is it goes on to say that as part of an ongoing continuous improvement activities, the city would always seek to improve financial reporting methods and so forth. And I think that's that's great. Although I won't be supporting this section simply because there are inaccuracies, particularly when you have the investment reserve a minus 170,000. I acknowledge that Mr. Hammond did clarify a question that I directed to him this afternoon on the matter. We're still short, even with the explanation. And I ask again that, in the spirit of the continuous improvement, that a cash inflow and a cash outflow on a monthly basis would greatly assist. Because some of the corrections that we make, we often wait till the end of the year when the Auditor General comes along and makes, a ton of corrections, and, we're 1 year out and it's really not that timely. It's not a big ask, but I do think it would go a long way. So I ask again that we include cash inflow, cash outflow for our monthly reporting.
So just on that and the question of how we present finances, the Deputy Mayor and I and the CEO have had a conversation about taking through the Audit and Risk Management Committee a conversation about the presentation of the finances. So I'd suggest anyone who is interested in being part of that conversation comes to the Audit and Risk Management Committee in February, because I think that's where we'll define the scope of any changes, if we were to make changes to how the finances are reported, will be defined. Can I just also remind councillors that if you have questions on the agenda, please copy all elected members so that we understand any concerns or issues that are being raised, because it is a bit of a difficulty, I guess, to be told something's incorrect and not have had the opportunity to investigate it as a group of elected members. So just a reminder. All right, I'll put that one to the vote. All those in favour? And against? Councillor Vusic against, and that's carried. And we now need to go to the confidential item. So I will move that we go behind closed doors, and I will wait to be advised that, and that's seconded by Councillor Lang, and I'll wait to be advised that the YouTube broadcast has